Hello everyone, my name is Jordan Collier and thanks for joining me for This Week in Muscle Shoals Civil War History for the week of October 15th through the 21st. October 20th and 21st, 1863, skirmish at Cane Creek as Sherman's Corps enters North Alabama. Back in the middle of September 1863, the Union Army faced a perilous situation. Under the leadership of Major General William Stark Rosecrans, the Federal foothold at Chattanooga was shaky at best and threatened at any moment to give way altogether. Their long, fragile, inadequate line of supply was constantly in jeopardy of disruption from Confederate raids. And meanwhile, the Confederates remained ever watchful from their perches in the mountains surrounding the city, looking for an opportunity to strike. This, combined with a lack of forward momentum, made the Federal High Command in Washington nervous that they were little more than sitting ducks. With rations becoming scarce, the situation was reaching a crisis level. To counteract this situation, Federal High Command ordered all of General Grant's available forces out of Mississippi, where they had been victorious at Vicksburg some 2 months before, to hasten to Rosecrans' aid at Chattanooga. Such a massive movement would take time, and there was no time to waste. But just as the Federals began to mobilize, disaster struck at Chattanooga. The Federal Army was severely rebuked at the Battle of Chickamauga on September 18th, and were left clinging to Chattanooga as an island of refuge in a sea of hostility. And suddenly, the peril of the Federal situation was dire. By the 29th of September, 3 divisions under command of Major General William Tecumseh Sherman had embarked on steamboats bound for Memphis. From Memphis, they transferred by rail to Corinth, Mississippi, beyond which point the railroad required substantial repair to be operable the rest of the way to the Tennessee River. Water levels in the Mississippi, Ohio, and Tennessee rivers were extremely low and greatly hampered the Federal movements. On the 3rd of October, personal tragedy struck Sherman when his eldest son, Willie, died in Memphis of typhoid fever. On October 16, 1863, Washington had lost patience with General Rosecrans, and the military organization in the West was restructured. Rosecrans was replaced with George H. Thomas, who was distinguished for his gallantry at Chickamauga, and rising star Ulysses S. Grant was placed in command of the Military Division of the Mississippi, commanding essentially all the forces in the West. Grant's first task was to personally secure the Union foothold at Chattanooga. He ordered the now commanding officer on the scene, Thomas, quote, "Hold Chattanooga at all hazards. I will be there as soon as possible. Please inform me how long your present supplies will last and the prospect for keeping them up." End quote. General Thomas responded, quote, "I will hold the town till we starve." End quote. This was certainly not hyperbole. The situation was so desperate that horses were already dying for want of forage. The situation was not much better at Corinth, Mississippi. Major General Frank P. Blair reported the same day to Sherman, quote, "Forage is very short here, and we are losing many valuable horses for want of hay." End quote. Supplying the army, as usual, was a virtually insurmountable logistical challenge. Sherman did not place a great deal of faith in the Memphis and Charleston Railroad as a means of supply, understanding that the Confederates would break it at every weak spot at every opportunity. He favored a more nomadic approach. Quote, "I would prefer to move about and learn to live on the corn and meal of the country." End quote. This, too, could be easier said than done, for, as Confederate General Stephen D. Lee pointed out on October 20th, quote, "Forage is scarce in this valley." End quote. The same day, October 20th, 1863, Lee's forces met with the vanguard of Sherman's column, moving east into Alabama, in what is now Colbert County, intent on checking their advance. The 1st Division, commanded by the Prussian-born Peter Joseph Osterhaus, encountered the Confederate cavalry at Dixon's Station. They were commanded by Colonel Jeffrey E. Forrest, younger brother of the notorious Nathan Bedford Forrest. Forrest had previously received orders to tear up the railroad as close to the Union Army as he could. The Federals took the offensive, led in large part by the 5th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry. After a skirmish, the Confederates withdrew to the east to a stronger position at Barton, where they formed a line of battle and offered a stubborn resistance. Eventually, the Confederates crossed to the east side of Cane Creek to act as a naturally defensible barrier. Osterhaus counteracted by bringing artillery to a commanding position on the west side of the creek, and the Confederates scattered, ending the day's engagement. Osterhaus left only a small detachment at Cane Creek as a sentry. But the following day, October 21st, the Confederates under command of Major General Stephen D. Lee took the offensive and drove Osterhaus's pickets at the creek. Upon reaching the main body of the Union division near Cherokee, severe fighting ensued, which halted any further offensive action by the Confederates. At nightfall, both commands withdrew, ending the skirmishing for the time being. Major General Lee reported his efforts to hamper the Union advance beyond the battlefield, saying, quote, "I am thoroughly destroying the railroad and will impede their advance as much as possible," end quote. The presence of Osterhaus's division took a heavy toll on the local population, which was already hard-pressed for forage. Jacob Albright explained in his Southern Claims petition the experience of Osterhaus in his neighborhood in October 1863. Quote, "General Sherman's command came into the country and commenced tearing down my fence. They shot my oxen and carried them off. They uncovered my cotton, which was covered with straw, and carried the cotton off. They burned the tanner's tools and bellows of the blacksmith shop. The command encamped on my place and all around my house. General Osterhaus had his headquarters in my house. There was some 30 or 40,000 soldiers, and they were generally engaged. The first day the officers would not allow them to take a thing, but the second day the officers told me that the men were obliged to forage, and they could not help the taking of my property. The day was cold and wet. They stripped away my barn of all the boards and planks to make bunks, and used the cotton for bedding. I complained to General Osterhaus and other officers in reference to my property. The general told me that I would have to let them take their course, that the weather was unpleasant, and that they had to have beds to lie on and provisions to feed." End quote. The people of the Muscle Shoals were becoming quite familiar with the hardship of supplementing the needs of large armies on the march, and they would still have to endure another 18 months of increasingly desperate requisitions. If you found this interesting, I hope that you'll click the like button, subscribe to the channel to get your weekly dose of Muscle Shoals Civil War history, and if you're interested to dive deeper, you can check out my podcast, Historical Insights. I'll put a link in the description. Thanks for joining me, and have a wonderful week.